Politicians talk about comprehensive tax reform. What's that about?
It means making significant changes to the individual income tax, the corporate income tax, and potentially consider other types of taxation as well. Not just adding on or making incremental changes to our current tax system.
So what should our objectives be for reforming the tax system?
We need comprehensive tax reform that will make the system simpler, fairer, more competitive, and generate adequate revenues to pay our bills and deliver on the promises we intend to keep. In my view, for it to be simple enough, 90% of individuals ought to be able to figure out how to file their own tax return. And if they can't, it's not simple enough.
What about a consumption tax in lieu of an income tax approach?
If we were starting with a blank sheet of paper, most economists would tell you having some type of a consumption tax that was not unduly burdensome on the poor would be preferable to having our current income, payroll, and other types of tax systems that we have right now. But it's not realistic to go from where we are today to a whole new system. We may, however, have to consider some form of consumption tax as a supplement to comprehensive income tax reform. But to do that, we need to make sure that we've restructured our finances and we have tough controls on spending.
What about a flat tax?
Some people want to have a flat tax, meaning one tax rate no matter what level of income you have. I think clearly we need to move to a flatter tax, but from a political standpoint, I don't think it's realistic to get to a full single rate flat tax.
David, you were head of the Government Accountability Office for 10 years, including both Republican and Democratic administrations. Is it true that 40% or more of American tax filers don't pay any income taxes?
Depending upon the year, anywhere from about 38 to 46% of individual tax filers pay zero income tax. And in fact, about 20% get money back through the Earned Income Tax Credit, not because they pay too much, because of their level of income. That's a problem. When you have 38 to 46% that don't pay income taxes, when the income tax funds all or substantially all the constitutional roles of the federal government, that's a big disconnect. So clearly one of the objectives of tax reform would be to get more people to pay something under a more progressive tax system where those who are better off pay more than they do today.
On the other end of the spectrum, is it true that the effective tax rate for very high-end individuals is lower than for many middle-income taxpayers?
Yes, the effective tax rate for many wealthy people is lower than middle-income individuals because many middle-income individuals are subject to the so-called alternative minimum tax. And therefore, the wealthy people get more benefits of tax deductions and special preferences, and in addition, they make most of their income in the form of capital gains and dividends, and they're subject to a lower tax rate than wages.
So what top rate should we be shooting for?
Most people believe that we ought to shoot for a top rate of somewhere between 25 and 28%, both on the individual level as well as the corporate level. But being able to get there depends upon how many deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions, or so-called tax preferences or tax expenditures, we can eliminate, because obviously we don't want to add to the deficit.
Are there any tax preferences that should be retained?
A vast majority of tax preferences should be eliminated in order to make the system simpler and to be able to get tax rates down. There are some that should be considered for retention. For example, charitable contributions. Since the government is going to end up spending significantly less than projected over time, charities are going to become more important, and therefore we want to encourage charitable giving. Secondly, home mortgage interest deduction. 2 homes are a want, 1 home is a need. So some type of reasonable limit for 1 home with regard to mortgage interest. And thirdly, retirement savings. We need to encourage savings in general and retirement savings in particular. But we need to consolidate the number of vehicles, we need to have a reasonable limit, and we need to make sure that retirement savings are preserved for death, disability, or retirement.
What about taxes on businesses? What types of reforms are needed there?
First, most businesses are taxed as individuals. but we need corporate tax reform as well. And that means broadening the base and lowering the rates to make it simpler and more competitive internationally. In addition, we need to think about taxing based upon earnings that are earned here in the United States rather than globally, while also considering some type of a minimum tax for corporations worldwide to deal with tax havens. Corporations need to have some type of an incentive for research and development. They also need reasonable deductions for depreciation. And we ought to consider the possibility of giving a deduction for dividends distributed, not just to be able to eliminate double taxation, but to encourage corporations to either distribute their excess cash for growth and jobs or to invest them for growth and jobs.